Africa is set to outperform other emerging markets in terms of growth opportunities for banks over the coming years. This is thanks to better macroeconomic policies. Even the change in commodity price cycles is not as bad for Africa as it would have been in previous decades. Earlier we spoke to Diana Layfield, the CEO at Standard Chartered Africa.
We make our profits primarily from our three core regions of Asia, Africa and the Middle East. We do business in the Americas and Europe, but those businesses are primarily flowing into our three core regions.
Zooming into Africa, Diana, what are your expectations with regard to the African market?
Our belief is that Africa is one of the key growth engines of the world economy for the next 10 years. As you know, it's now gone up to 8 out of 10 of the fastest growing economies in the world in the IMF rankings for the next 10 years. And we see great opportunities in the African markets and great opportunities for businesses across Africa.
Any key particular industries where you see these growth projections coming from?
Well, I think what's exciting is not just the classic industries, but some of the newer industries. I think we'll continue to see real opportunities in what I call the old commodities, so oil and gas and others. But I think there's also great opportunity in new commodities, so agriculture being one of those areas of new financing, but also perhaps most importantly of all in consumer industries, where we expect to see about 1.3 trillion of income by 2020. And I think that's a testament to a whole new class of business that you haven't seen in Africa in the past, and something which is really transforming the socio-economic landscape.
Just on that, Diana, we know that Africa produces a lot of raw materials. Do you believe that we'll see a strong value-added industrial network in Africa?
We see value added as being critical, and I think you're seeing increasingly governments across the continent feeling the same. The idea of that value add or beneficiation, as they call it, is rising up governments' agendas. We're doing our best to finance that. As you know, we're financing the Dangote Corporation's new petrochemical and fertilizer plant in Nigeria. That will remove the need for Nigeria to import any fertilizer at all and will cut fuel imports by half. But it's just one example of a whole host, I think, of examples across the continent of people trying to bring that value add, bring that beneficiation home to African markets. And frankly, it's critical for more than just the raw economy. It's critical in terms of employment and again, the social impact of that employment in those countries.
What are some of the challenges that you face on the African continent?
The most significant one is obviously an infrastructure challenge, which is a challenge for us and for all business across Africa. There's an expectation that something like $30 trillion of infrastructure investment is required over the next 10 years. And you see that in movement of goods and services by road and by rail. You see it critically in power. And that's one of the reasons why we've contributed $2 billion to the Obama Power Africa campaign. If we can ensure that Africa gets power, the issues that you've raised around value add and manufacturing become a whole lot easier. So the infrastructure obstacles are probably the most significant. There's obviously in some markets, and as you know, Africa varies hugely by country. There are markets in which have had very difficult times over the last 20 years, and therefore getting certain types of skilled labour is also challenging. So there are some people challenges, some infrastructure challenges, and occasionally we come across some governance challenges in terms of the general legal infrastructure.
Just on that, what about regulatory challenges? Oftentimes there isn't a link between sub-Saharan Africa, East Africa, as well as the West when it comes to regulation.
Well, I think it depends on the type of regulation you're talking about. Certainly in respect of financial services regulation, I actually think Africa has a very strong track record. If you look at the impact of the financial crisis on different regions around the world, Africa did pretty well during the crisis. And some of that was to do with the type of industry and the type of financial services industry it had, the fact that it had avoided relatively complex products. But I think credit in a number of markets also has to go to the regulators, who I think did a good job through that period. I think Africa is home to some of the best regulators in the world.